All right, so wherever I was talking more about adjusting percentages and running through these stacks. But when I see some massive, if you want to be this heavy on Austin Eckler, that's fine. But if you don't want to be because he's a little bit chalky, you're going to have to come down, to about half the field or something like that to cut underneath him. Some of these players, like, and receivers especially, like I will take more on the running back side and be okay with it. But receivers especially, I just don't want to see a ton of those guys in there. So I'll come down and I'll start playing with these numbers. Being way overweight on Derrick Henry to me makes some sense because the dude can just beast. Being overweight even on Eckler is probably okay, but I might cut it down to say 50%, being that they're running backs. James Robinson, being overweight on him is fine. Defenses are very volatile. If you find a chalky defense, you might consider going underweight on it, but 10% is not that chalky. 20% for another running back, I'm about right there. So this is all it is, just feel up and down and up and down and up and down. And Cooper Kupp again, he might beast, he might not, being 25% being a little bit over. I don't know what I'm going to do with that number, but for now I'll just cut it down. And we'll see. Now, this is one, Kiki QT I might be overweight on. Akins, I might be, because their ownerships are already so low that I'm then going to want to jump over those numbers in case they have big games. Higbee, over 15% to 2%. I like it. Quarterbacks doesn't matter so much. Again, those are such high floor positions that if the guy is very, very, very chalky, I might just hope he has a bad day and cut underneath him. Because what I want is the leverage of a scenario like this where Higbee gets a couple of touchdowns at 2% across the field and I've got 15% of him. I don't need 100% of him, but I got 15%. And so I'll re-optimize this. I'll pause the video and then we'll come back and we'll run through some of these again. All right, so this time we've switched things up a little bit. And, we're still at 100% Brandon Cooks. I do not know why that just happened with a 15% exposure max on there. That's interesting. But we've cut some of these others down. We're under 50% for Eckler. Oh, it's probably because I've got him locked. We're under 50%. Let's make sure. Boy, that would be silly if I did. There he is. He's locked. That's why. Okay, so he's unlocked now. But that explains that. He'll be at 15% next run. But this is what you're going to do. You're going to run this machine over and over and over again. I came up on Derrick Henry a little bit. I capped Eckler at 50%. James Robinson came up a little bit. Very heavy on the defense here. I don't know if I will play that or cut that back. Who knows? But these are just the ideas that you're going to do. And notice that a lot of these guys are cut down. But Kiki Kuti has good leverage on the field. Jakobi Meyers, good leverage on the field. If they have big games, will they? I don't know. Jarvis Landry, decent leverage on the field. Who else? Deshaun Watts. Hawkinson, okay leverage on the field. I might get that up a little bit. And I would do that by bumping it just a smidge through his projection here instead of forcing a minimum. I don't like forcing minimums on guys very often. A lot of times, when I forced that minimum back in the first video on Russell Wilson at 10%, it automatically said you can't run 85 lineups, you can only run 6. So I went back and I jacked him back down to 0%, and then it ran 85 lineups just fine. I don't know why it does that, it just does. But then you're going to end up with a lot of these receivers mixing and matching at lower percentages. That's okay. So Goff, Kupp, only those two. That's obviously a universal rule, not my stack. And then run it back with Hawkinson and Robinson. You've got Cooks and James Robinson, Josh. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that lineup. Deshaun Watson, Brandon Cooks. See, a lot of times these lower stacks, these QB wide receiver stacks, maybe they get run back with an opponent, maybe they don't, but they're minimal stacks. Those hit up higher. If you ran just a one-off lineup, it's going to be your highest projected fantasy points. That doesn't mean it's best because these are median projections. They're not ceiling type projections. If you had ceiling projections, you might get stacks in there more often. Or if you put a correlation boost, which I don't do, but if you put a correlation boost up there in the rules, you might get much, much bigger stack projections. That said, I still want to see my defense and my running back are correlated here. Fine. Again, this isn't something I would run in a bigger contest with Jamal Williams and Green Bay Packers, but in a nickel contest where I'm trying to beat 100,000 people, I don't mind. Deshaun Watson, Brandon Cooks, Jordan Akins on a twofer, and then what? Eckler and Jakobi Meyers, that's fine. I don't know why I'm stuck here. Hold on a second. All right, so let's go back through this again and let's scan through some of these lineups. You know, Deshaun Watson again, QT, Cooks, Myers, Eckler. Seems to be those are going to be popular combinations. There are ways to break them up if you want to spend hours and hours, but as a basic domination station setup video, this is working. This is what you want to do. Robinson, Hawkinson again. Let's scroll down past some of these guys. Herbert, Eckler, Henry. It'd be interesting to get Keenan Allen in there, but I don't know what his ownership might be. What if Keenan Allen's 20% owned? If Keenan Allen's 20% owned, that'd be a great little fade and hope for this different combination because you might catch a chalky offense with some sub-optimal pieces or some lower owned pieces. Not that these are super low owned on their own right. But you know, it just bottom line is it's mixed, it's matched. Look at 3 Dolphins in the same lineup. I'm not sure that I want any part of that lineup. That would be one I'd uncheck or I'd rerun this thing. But you got Fitzpatrick and Gesicki run back with T. Higgins. That's going to be lower owned for sure, especially with Higgins down at 2% projected. I've got a secondary stack of Raiders and Jacobs. That's also going to be lower owned. Another thing that you can do is you can come up here, you can sort. Matthew, turn that down, please. Sorry for my kid, guys. Ooh, sorry for that. That was just a reflex reacting to my kid's computer. But so when whatever I was saying down in here with the ownership projections and the team type stuff, what you can do is you can come up here and you can sort your projected ownerships from the top down, sort by projected ownership, and you'll find some very, very chalky lineups up top. I guess the 157 is the top. But as it comes down, it'll sort down a little bit, down a little bit, down a little bit. Okay, so in your cash games, you don't mind this number being really, really high. Some weeks over 200 is great. That's a good sign that you're on the chalk for cash games, and there's a lot of insulation in that chalk. However, in your tournament lineups, it is being discovered that around 130 to 140% is about the sweet spot of percentage of ownership for tournaments. Why? Because you've got a few lower owned plays in there. Not a lot. If you get all the way down here to the bottom, and let's say you're sitting at, that's probably too low. Maybe not for the nickels, but that's probably too low otherwise. Because you're just too off track. You're too off course. Now you can win nickels and quarters and things like that with a lineup like that. But you have to understand that like your 3-man leagues, your 10-man leagues, things that chalkier builds still tend to win, that's getting too far off track. That's getting too GPP only. Okay, so you might stick around up here more in the 135. That's what's typically winning the milli makers these days. But if I came back up here, and if 157 was my high, and I came down here a little bit to 145, there's a 20-man league, 100-man league, 10-man league type winning lineup because it's still got a big foundation of chalk in it. Let's find it. Let's see if we can figure out. Josh Jacobs should be highly owned. Dalvin Cook should be highly owned. Jarvis Landry should be decent. Brandon Cook should be highly owned. Austin Eckler, highly owned. Decent defense. So this has all got some decent pieces in it. Now where it gets funky is the Baker Mayfield play, the QT play, the Hawkinson play. Hawkinson's got a floor though. This is the kind of thing that might get into a 10-man league. I wouldn't run this in 10-man league. Baker Mayfield's way too goofy for a 10-man league. But it's showing you that something like this might help guide you in terms of how risky a contest do I want to put these lineups in. Something like this, I'm just going to download all 80 of them, throw them in the nickels, and be done with it and see where it pans out. If I identified my stacks correctly, that works. Now I've got another thing getting off track a little bit, but I've got my quarterbacks. I've got a wide variety of quarterbacks here, and that's fine. I might take small shots at some of these guys, but I might take some of the more consistent quarterbacks, and I may just build big stacks off of those guys, and then hope that something hits with 15 or 20 or 30 lineups in it, because then that will carry me across the finish line with 20 or 30 lineups if that stack hits. Play it with a lot of chalk, get a lot of that stuff through the middle, and then take some shots on some other stuff. There are multiple ways to do this. I just wanted to show you that this way works, number one. This is just basic setup, basic rules, basic things. But from here, you can tweak and tweak and tweak until you're pointed backwards. It doesn't matter. And the better you get at fine-tuning your own process, maybe you build in blocks, 20 lineups of this, and then 20 lineups of that, where I've locked in um, Eckler, James Robinson, and Dalvin Cook. And just that's what I've and boom, whatever it spits out is what it spits out. If those three running backs do well, my lineups in that block of 20 lineups do well. There are people that do that. You can run it around stacks. I like Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis, and Jarvis Landry this week, for whatever reason. And then I'm going to run 15 lineups with that combination. You can lock them in and do it. You can manually do. You don't need to set up these rules if you don't want to. You can run in blocks. We do that in baseball quite a bit, hockey quite a bit, where we center around stacks of teams that we like, offenses that we like, and then run 20 or 25 lineups, and then pick another one. And then all we have to do is hit that offense correctly, and we've got 20 or 25 lineups that are going to min cash. Some of them might go really, really deep. And then if I do that with 2 blocks or 3 blocks, then the majority of my lineups make it through and I profit in MME. That's one way to attack this. The other way is to spread out. Take random chances and hope some unique freak lineup gets all the way through, because in your big 600,000 person nickel contest, it takes the freak to win. Okay, these are things we can talk about back and forth, but in terms of tweaking any further than this, that's kind of going to be on you, because you need to learn where forcing Russell Wilson in at 10% limited you. And you need to go back and you need to undo what you did so that you can start over again without erasing all of your changes. And that's just an experiment that you have to run on your own. You've seen a little bit of how I do it, you've seen a little bit of the results, you've heard a couple of the mistakes, but I can't see you operate the machine. None of us coaches can. That's where you have to get to a certain level of competence and then be willing to experiment further on your own, because that's where you're going to get really, really good, if that makes sense. I can get you to a certain point where you can be competitive with the Sharks and you can be out there swimming with them on a week in and week out basis and you can beat them. But for you to become legendary, it's going to require your own unique thoughts. It's going to require your own knowledge of the system, of the machine, and what you're trying to do, and bring your vision, your game plan, your strategy, attack plans to life. That's what's going to actually take you into legendary status and up into the stratosphere. And if that's where you want to go, then this will get you to a point where you can now be dangerous, and then you can keep playing with the machine and practicing with the machine and investing the additional hours into your own unique game plans that's going to take you even further. Hopefully that helps, guys. I'll take off from here, turn it over to you. We'll be back maybe tomorrow with a cheat sheet comparison video, and that ought to just about wrap up week 13. Peace out, homies. We'll talk to you on the other side.